All right. Welcome, everyone. Those of you who do not know me, my name is Kate Mueller. I am the product and customer champion and resident cheesemonger here at KnowledgeOwl. In practice, that means that I wear a ton of hats. So I write our documentation, I write blog posts, I do most of the quality assurance testing on our new feature releases and some of our more complicated bug fixes. I still occasionally answer some support tickets. I wear a lot of hats. I also write documentation as part of that. So if you are in a similar boat, welcome. You are in good company. This is the title Wisdom Wednesday of October. And today we are going to talk about using KnowledgeOwl Glossary and really trying to get the most functionality out of it. And so make sure it's configured in ways that make sense. All right. So let me share my screen before I forget to do that also. So out of the box, KnowledgeOwl, all knowledge bases in KnowledgeOwl come with a glossary functionality. It is a knowledge-based glossary. At a very basic level, what this allows you to do is to define glossary terms and then to provide definitions for those terms. How you use glossary generally falls into a couple of different patterns. And so most of my talk today is going to be talking through what those patterns might look like, and therefore the types of features or the ways that you might want to set things up in KnowledgeOwl to kind of fit with those patterns. So I'm working this little test knowledge base. I have a few glossary terms defined here. I would say one of the patterns we see for glossary usage is that you have a whole bunch of acronyms or a whole bunch of terms that you want to make sense of for people. So the primary pattern here is more that like you want to have a place to store all of those that everybody can go to find them if they need to look something up. And that's more that like you need the glossary to exist and you need it to have things in it. So all glossaries are accessible in KnowledgeOwl knowledge bases by just adding /glossary onto the end of it. Most knowledge bases by default will have an option for this enabled in the table of contents. So you should have this option here. If you do not have that option and you want it, don't worry, there's a setting for that. We tuck it into basic settings down here in the table of contents section and website settings. You'll see there's an option to add a glossary link to the top of the table of contents. Check that box, save. Your table of contents will now have this little glossary link. So that's one usage pattern, is that like, oh, I want to have this place where all of these terms are defined so that there's no confusion about what that might be. This might be something that I want to direct people to as a permanent resource. One option there is the table of contents. Another option is to have it show up directly in search. So by default, if I search for glossary, I'm not going to get anything. We actually released a small new little feature around this in the last year, I think. So it's in search settings. There's an option to display link to glossary when the word glossary is searched for. Check that box and save. I will rerun my search for glossary. And I now get this option to directly view glossary. So if this is your usage pattern and you just want people to be able to get to the glossary to see whatever's in there, that's a great setting to use. I'd say one other option here, if glossary is super important to you, one other option would be actually to tuck it into your top navigation. And we have a merge code for that, so you don't really have to think about it very much, which is delightful. So if I hop into my custom HTML and my top navigation, let's say I want to add it up here, maybe before the contact us, what I can do is copy one of these other lines. And I'll get rid of the merge code that's actually in there. And come in here to KD merge codes and grab the link to the glossary page. And if I have my cursor where I want it, I can just hit insert and dump it in. Otherwise, you can copy the merge code and paste it in. And once I save that guy, you'll see that I now have a link to my glossary directly in my top navigation. So these are all methods to just sort of get people navigating directly in here. And if that's really your primary use case for glossary, this should be enough to get you there. But most people who use Glossary don't just want it to live as a static page somewhere that people might reference. They also want to be able to leverage these glossary terms and their definitions inside of their content. So a great example of this would be, I have some type of, let's say, acronym. Lots of us have lots of acronyms in our definitions. And it's easier for me to just use that acronym everywhere in my documentation itself. But what I really want is to be able to like define what that acronym means to a broader audience. And that's where having my glossary terms and my definitions can come in really handy. So there's two ways to kind of expose this. So let me show you the end product before I get into why and how you would set that up. So this is the exact same content, just as actually in our live support knowledge base. If you're using glossary terms, they'll get this sort of double underline treatment. And then if you hover over them, the definition for that term is what gets displayed within the box. There are some ways to customize this through CSS, but this is the basic functionality. And if you're going this route, you can choose to either manually insert those definitions into your content or to automatically insert them. We call it auto highlighting. I'm going to walk through both of those examples. There are advantages and disadvantages to each. So I'm back here in my test knowledge base. Get rid of support right now so I don't get distracted by it. And I have this content already that's got some acronyms that do match terms in my glossary. First point, talking about glossary terms, is that we've got the idea of a term, we have the definition, and then there's this display title. The difference between terms and display titles often trips people up. So let's talk about that. We have the option to do this sort of auto highlighting, as I mentioned. And when we auto highlight, we have to do some very exact matching on the term. And that highlighting is very finicky. And so there are a bunch of characters that we do not let you put into glossary terms themselves. So you'll see we have this nice big warning at the top of the page that says glossary terms may only contain alphanumeric characters, spaces, dashes, underscores, and apostrophes. Other characters will be automatically removed. That is true. It will actually strip all the other characters out. And why do you care about this? Well, it may be that your terms actually should have spaces, dashes, or anything other than a space, a dash, or an underline, such as a parenthesis. Very useful if you're defining acronyms. Parentheses will break our auto highlighting tool. So that's why we have the idea of a display title separate from the term. So the term is what we'll use under the covers as we're trying to do any automatic highlighting for you. That is what should appear in your documentation if you want it to be auto highlighted. But the display title is what you actually want people to see either when they're viewing the glossary itself or as they're kind of seeing the definition pop up in other places. So you'll notice that I've got pretty much all of these have some version of this display title. This first one, hard refresh, I'm just setting my case here. This is probably not necessary. I likely could have done it in the term itself. But for my others, all three of these are acronyms that are being used in my documentation. But then what I'm using as my display title here is the full term with the acronym in parentheses behind it, which gives me this a little bit nicer display in my glossary itself. It also means that from a content writing perspective, all I really have to worry about here is getting my acronym or my term right. I don't have to worry about all that other text that goes in with it. And that just ends up being a thing that's delightfully presented to my end user. So display titles don't impact highlighting at all. They are just the title that we actually use here on the glossary page itself. And you can do whatever you want with them. If there isn't a display title, we will use the term itself as the display title. So they're sort of like an optional add-on if you need it. If you don't need it, you can ignore it. It doesn't actually impact the functionality itself. So once I've got these terms, my nice little parentheses and my acronyms and whatever else in them, then the question becomes, how do I want to use these in my content? Option one, which is available at all times in all places, is to manually insert that definition into your content. So I have a nice little demo here for that purpose. So what I can do here is highlight the text that I want and insert the definition. Advantages to using this approach. A, you have total control over what's getting highlighted. So you're only manually inserting the highlights that you want, where you want them to occur. So in this case, SP is what would normally get triggered by an auto highlight because that's what my term is. I can choose to actually insert the term over this entire little thread. So it's service provider parentheses SP, which gives a slightly better user experience. I can insert it into a word that has nothing to do with the underlying term. I don't recommend that. It's a little confusing, but you can totally do it. So if you've got like 3 variations on a term and 1 glossary definition that kind of encapsulates all of them, you can insert a manual definition there. So what we're going to do here in the editor is to just highlight whatever the word or words we want to use that definition with are. We'll come up here to the little add glossary term icon in the editor. We'll click that, and then we'll start to search for our glossary term. Hopefully your glossary is small enough that this is easy to find. It will expose a kind of a preview of what the definition is, so you can try to be sure that you're picking the right one. You've got some really similar stuff. And once you insert that definition, you'll see that sort of double underline treatment here directly in the editor. So you can tell that you've manually inserted it, which is helpful as you come back to edit content later. I will do the same thing here for my IEP. So I've got both of my little definitions in there. And if I pop back out here into that content, you will see that I now get my nice little hover over effect, which gives me the definition that I've manually inserted there. The other option, and one that a lot of folks pick because you don't have to think about it, is to have KnowledgeOwl automatically highlight matching glossary terms. One of the advantages to this is that it saves you time because you're not having to do all those manual insertions. You don't have to think about it. And you don't have to have like a constant, you either don't have to have deep knowledge of what's in your glossary, or you don't have to constantly check what's in the glossary to be sure, oh, is this term in there? Do I need to worry about adding it? You can just kind of trust that whatever predefined terms you've got will be automatically highlighted. That setting is a knowledge base wide thing. So you have to turn it on for the whole knowledge base. That also lives in settings basic. Also in website settings in this glossary terms section. For each glossary term that appears in an article, automatically highlight the term X times. So you can say, I only want to auto highlight it the first time it appears in an article. I want to highlight it the first 2 times. You can go all the way up to 10. That's a lot of highlighting, but could be really useful. You never know. So once I check that box, I'm going to save my changes here. And come out to a piece of content that I have not manually inserted those definitions into. And you'll see if I hover over either of those terms, I get exactly what I would expect here. It's going to auto highlight for me. The disadvantages to auto highlighting, there are a couple. One of them is that, remember how when I manually inserted and I was viewing that content in the editor, I could see that the definition had been inserted, like I get that double underline treatment. I have a visual cue that that's going on. If I hop into the place where I didn't manually do that, you'll see I don't get any visual indicator here in the editor because the auto highlighting actually happens only in the live knowledge base as the content is loaded. So you don't have as much visibility on the editor side into what's getting highlighted and doesn't. For some people, this is not a big deal. I mean, you can hop into preview and see it. You can hop into the live knowledge base and see it. It might just be one small extra step in your review process. For other people, it's wildly annoying and they like to stick with manual highlighting for that reason. That's problem one. The one other problem would be if your glossary happens to have terms that are also words in other contexts. So for example, I have this glossary term for online writing lab, which abbreviates to OWL. And in my glossary, my auto highlighting term here is OWL because that's the acronym that gets used all over the place. But in my live content, if I happen to have content that has just the normal word OWL in it, that will get the auto highlighting treatment because our glossary auto highlighter isn't smart enough to say, I must only highlight this if it's all caps. It's not that picky. So this can be one of the places where having a good handle on what your terms are and how much overlap those terms have with words that are actually totally unrelated can help you make the decision between whether you want to do auto highlighting or manual highlighting in your content. I think this is actually, there's one other option that has nothing to do with highlighting, but does have to do with surfacing glossary definitions that I want to be sure that I do not neglect. So previously I turned on that option where if I search the word glossary, I get stuff that has glossary in it. If I happen to search one of my glossary terms, by default, I'm just going to get stuff that contains that term in the content, but it's not going to expose anything about the glossary term itself. And if your knowledge base is used in a way that people might be searching this and wanting to surface those definitions, don't worry, you have a setting for that. This is also in settings search near the other glossary option, and it is display glossary definition for matching term. What this will do is if, somebody searches for something that is a glossary term, it will display the glossary term and its definition above all other search results and give a link to direct somebody into the portion of the glossary that term comes from. It's just a kind of nice little value add if you're using those definitions and you think people are going to search those terms and they want an answer to a question of what the term means rather than the content where the term is used. I think these are all the major settings I wanted to capture here.